Denver Sports presents the Mile High Hockey Podcast with Mike Evans, presented by Fort Comfort Gutters. Now here's your host with the latest on the Burgundy and Blue, Mike Evans.
Hey everybody, welcome in, and look who I have. Look at this guy right here, Matt Smith, everybody. How you doing, my man?
I'm doing great. I'm thrilled to be back.
Yeah, let's see. I think the last time you were on this podcast, it was shortly after the trade deadline. Pre-deadline. Well, let's start right there. I know that you weren't, if I remember correctly that day, you were saying that you didn't think the Avalanche should try to do too much at the trade deadline. Basically, punt on this year, load up for next year. Are you glad, or do you feel like you've been proven wrong?
Well, I think there was a couple of things, right? So at the deadline, we were looking ahead. What are you going to do? We knew they had to get rid of Johansson. I mean, if you want to make any sort of run, you can't bring him with you. They went ahead and did that. They got Sean Walker in. The immediate reaction was a defenseman? Mm-hmm. Well, what else is coming? And eventually, you and I think that day brought up Bo Byram for Casey Mittelstadt specifically. Yeah. And we pitched the idea around. I think you asked me, you go, would you do it? And I was like, nah, I wouldn't do it.
Well, because you didn't know if you were going to be able to replace the defenseman in Byram.
But they got Walker.
Right.
And he has turned out to be a really nice fit. Now, they're probably going to lose Walker in free agency because they're not going to be able to bring everybody back. Yeah. But either way, what Chris McFarland did was he gave his team a chance. Casey Mittelstadt was the best available potential 2C at the deadline. He went and grabbed him. And credit to the Avs scouting staff who saw something in him that he had not shown yet. Because the player that he's been, in my opinion, in the playoffs was somebody completely different from what we saw in the regular season, which is exactly what Chris McFarland said at the deadline. We believe there's more to him, and they were proven right. So, yes, I was right. Look, am I glad that they didn't punt now? Yeah, because it looks like things are moving in the right direction.
Well, before we look ahead to Dallas, let's look back on that Winnipeg series. And I'll be honest, I didn't know what to expect from this team. I had no idea. I was on this podcast saying I could easily see this team go to the Western Conference Finals. I could easily see them lose in the first round of the playoffs. They look terrific in the first round. What about that first series surprised you the most, gave you the most optimism that, hey, maybe this team has what it takes to be a Stanley Cup contender?
A lot surprised me. Because the team that we saw games 1 through 5, we hadn't seen them all year, in my opinion. Maybe in stretches, but certainly not the back half of the season. They had the really good stretch out of the trade deadline, right? What did they win, 8, 9 in a row, something like that? Then after that, things, in my opinion, got a little shaky down the stretch. I mean, you lose to Edmonton, Vegas, Dallas, Winnipeg to close out the regular season. You weren't entering playoffs in good form. So if they had brought the team that I'd seen at the end of the year into the playoffs against Winnipeg, they get smoked. They didn't. Everybody raised their game, which you would expect. But against Seattle, they were not able to translate that into offensive production. And it was still a physical team. Maybe you didn't have the Vezina caliber goaltender in Connor Hellebuck, but Seattle was able to neutralize them coming through the neutral zone, slow down the breakouts, slow down the rush chances. And the Avs, man, I mean, credit to everybody in that lineup. But again, I go back to Casey Mittelstadt really unlocked what they were able to do. You can send offense in waves now. We've got and Lehkonen. I mean, I feel like he probably doesn't get talked about enough. You know, Nichushkin and Lehkonen are the first pair of teammates to score 5 goals to open, to score in 5 straight games to open in NHL playoffs. Those two guys have stepped up and met the moment. They're playoff players, right? And Nichushkin, he's been able to play on the top line because Lehkonen and Mittelstadt with Parise's done a nice job, have been able to kind of step in for Drouin and carry that second line.
Well, I always knew going into the series, I could feel pretty comfortable about what they'd get from their core players, right? What you'd get from MacKinnon, what you'd get from Makar, Rantenen, Lehkonen. I felt pretty confident in that. But, you know, I've been banging that 2C and supporting cast drum for 2 years now. And it's always been topic number 1 on my mind as to what this team has to be better at is that supporting cast. And I think the moves of last year, or the moves of this offseason by management validated the idea that, yeah, they did not do a good job last year with their supporting cast, with the 2C. And then even the moves at the trade deadline validated the idea that management didn't think they did a good job with their offseason moves because they made so many moves at the trade deadline. But it's still the same thing with this team, Matt, is that if you feel good and confident about what you're going to get from this core, then it's just a matter of, do you get enough help? And so when you come off a series in which Mittelstadt was terrific, Parise was making contributions,
everybody
up and down the line, Colton, Trenin is making a contribution. If this team can get those kind of contributions to go along with their core players, which I think is the best core in hockey, I'll put it up against anybody, man, then I think you could start to dream big with this team.
Yeah, whereas I don't believe you could before playoffs. And that's how, at least in my opinion, that's how I entered playoffs, going, And we heard from MacKinnon after the Winnipeg series. He talked about it. He said they came in really humble this year. They didn't play well down the stretch. They knew it. There was doubt in the room. When was the last time doubt crept into that room? Maybe last year after Val left?
Yeah.
In the playoffs? Maybe. But it hasn't been there for a while. So it was impressive to me to see they were able to turn the boat so fast. And we haven't even mentioned Alexandar Georgiev, right? I mean, to allow 7 goals, to be as criticized as he was, and to bounce back in such a short period of time was impressive.
Yeah.
And then to do it again and again and again and close the series out. I mean, if you take away game 1, he's probably the best goaltender of the playoffs so far. I mean, if we're just that or Jake Ottinger, who they're about to face.
Huge respect for Georgiev.
Maybe
because
Swayman.
This guy was, man, the reaction around town was, you can't win with this guy. You got to bench this guy. You had people saying he should never start another game, should never wear an Avalanche jersey in another game ever again. That was the reaction that people had. And he knew it. He knew what was being said about him. He knew what was being said about him probably behind his back in his own locker room. For him to be able to summon up the mental fortitude, the guts to come out and play the way he did the rest of the way was incredible. And you got to feel good for him. Do you feel like he's sort of been through the worst, and that being able to come out of it the way that he did, he's good now? Or do you still worry about a regression with him?
Yeah, I don't know about a regression. I think he's built some confidence. It's just all about, can you stay in a rhythm? Can you limit the grade A chances in front of him? And I was actually looking just now at the advanced analytics of the Dallas and Vegas series. Dallas had 99 slot chances. That's a lot of chances from in front of the goaltender. And credit to Vegas and, in their goaltending tandem, in their big defensive core for limiting the damage that the Stars were able to do. But you give up 99 slot chances, then ask me again game 3 or 4, right? So I'm confident, but it's a dependent position with the way the Avs are constructed. You're dependent on getting good enough defensive hockey to limit those grade A chances in front of you. And then if you can just be average to slightly above average, this team has enough as long as they're healthy. So I don't expect some sort of, oh no, here we go again with Georgiev. But am I also here to tell you that there's no way that happens again? No. But I feel encouraged. I mean, if they get the version that they got of him in games 2 through 5 the rest of the way, we're Gucci.
Yeah, we're very good. So did you get the team you wanted the Avs to play in Dallas, or were you hoping for Vegas? So what went into the thinking why you would have preferred one team over the other? Did you get the team you wanted?
We learned the lesson last year of picking your opponent. I was very adamant last year, win the division, win the division, win the division. You want Seattle. You match up best with Seattle. We saw what happened there. So taking a note from that, I haven't really been, all that gung-ho on I'd rather have Vegas or Dallas. No matter who you got, you were getting a good game. You're getting a good series. You're getting a good matchup, a very tough opponent who knows you well. But that being said, I did want Vegas. I wanted to exercise some of those playoff demons. I got some buddies in Vegas. Want to, razz them a little bit and talk a little bit. But also, I think that Vegas can't really skate with the Avs. And I think it ended up playing out over the course of the series where Vegas couldn't really skate with Dallas. And I thought that Dallas was the better overall team. I would have loved to see Vegas, right? Because they had the short off season. They're dealing with the repeat potential. So let's go. You know what I mean? I don't really have that strong of a preference. It would have been fun. It would have been fun to play Vegas, but Dallas will be a great series.
I do think Dallas, and I was feeling this way before they played Game 7, was that if you look at Dallas would have the potential to be, I think, a little bit more dangerous because Vegas, to me, there's a reason it's tough to repeat, right? You just don't come back with the same kind of mentality that you had the year that you won. Plus, you had some guys banged up, and I felt, boy, if Vegas could sort of, just find a way to escape past Dallas, I think the Avalanche would be getting the easier matchup with Vegas. Look, Dallas showed me a lot, right? This was a team that had lost to Vegas last year in the playoffs, and then they get Vegas again with a chance to, exercise those demons.
Sure, yeah.
And then they lose the first 2 games at home. And at that point, I'm like, wow, Dallas is a fraud, right? But then, to their credit, they climb out of that hole. They win the next 2 games in Vegas. They go on. They win in 7. And now I look at Dallas as, okay, not only were they the best team in the West this year, not only did they get revenge against a Vegas team that, had them on the ropes early in the series, but now that they've gotten through this, there are just some hurdles that exist for a team that once you get past it, I think they look around, they're like, okay, all right, we're starting to believe. We start to feel that we got something going here and that we're ready for that next step. I think Dallas feels like they're there, and to go along with a team that's got good goaltending, can roll 4 lines, has some good depth, I think this is going to be a tough matchup for the Avs. I know you got them in 5?
I got them in 5. Last night on social media I put out 5 or 6, but I feel pretty confident about it. And it's crazy because I would have never felt that way, okay, heading into the playoffs like a week and a half ago. But
do you think there are much differences between Winnipeg and Dallas? See, the more I watched Winnipeg, all credit to the Avalanche, right? They were terrific. But to me, if you're able to go and score 28 goals in a series, I think that says a little bit about, or says a lot also about the team that you're going up against.
I think they're similar makeups, right? Like there's no superstars.
Right.
Like they've got some really Pavelski, Duchesne, Wyatt Johnston now, he's coming along. The kid, he's had a hell of a playoff so far. This has been a breakout year for him. But outside of that, Jamie Benz and some veterans on that
they're
team.
Kind of a sum is greater than the individual parts type thing, right?
Much the same as Winnipeg.
Right.
Whereas the Avs, I think you can make the argument they've got some individual parts that probably supersede what they do collectively. Now, that being said, I think Dallas has more of an ability than Winnipeg did to blend their styles, to play whichever way you want to play, which is why I probably wanted Vegas, because I don't think they could really go track meet like the Avs can. So now you got a team that knows you really well. The Avs went 3-1 against Dallas in the regular season. The one loss was at the end of the year, but based upon what happened in the Winnipeg series, we'd be fools not to throw out the regular season record at this stage. The Avs got outscored by Winnipeg 70-4. So, I'm comfortable with the matchup. I'm bullish on the matchup. I can't stand Dallas. I can't wait to play this series because it'll be a lot of fun. I do think it is very, very important to at least get one of the first 2. I think it's very important because I do respect Dallas enough to the point where, hey, you lose those first 2, you're in a position where you probably need 3 and 4 at home. So let's go ahead and take care of business. We want the sweep. We'll set up for the split, right? Come home 1-1. If that's the case, maybe come home 2-0. Would it surprise me if the Avs blitz Dallas in Game 1 tomorrow night? Absolutely not.
Oh, I think if you're looking at grabbing one of the first 2 in Dallas, to me, you got to grab Game 1 because the Avalanche are rested. They're super confident right now. I would think that this team just can't wait to get back on the ice to pick up where they left off.
That's
against
7 days
Winnipeg,
off, right? So.
Right. I would think they're just chomping at the bit. Meanwhile, Dallas, we played. You were filling in for Schlereth this morning, and we were playing the radio call of the final seconds of that Dallas win, and that place was going bonkers. And you know what it's like, a Game 7 under any circumstances. You get it at home. You win. There's so much emotion that goes with that. I just think it's hard to turn around less than 48 hours later against a different opponent and not suffer a bit of a letdown.
Yeah, it's possible.
And I think that the Avalanche are walking into a great position to grab game one, steal game one before Dallas really has a chance to look around and realize, okay, we're in a new series.
Yeah. We sit here and say this in the back of my mind. I go, gosh, the regular season Avs show up. Maybe it's a different conversation. Right. I'm just hoping they can, after a week off, there's no rust, and I hope we can see a consistent effort. They should have proven to themselves that they can do this based upon how they performed in the first round. Now, just because you proved it doesn't mean you just, rest on your laurels. You still have to go out there and do it, and Dallas is not going to be an easy out, even if they did just play a 7-game series. I just look at it, and I think the Avs have the matchup advantages in key areas except for goal, right? Jake Ottinger has only allowed 14 goals in 7 games. That's an impressive number, especially against the defending Stanley Cup champions. Now, that's a much slower series, less chances. It's, not nearly played at the speed that the Avs are about to play at. So can the Avs continue that breakneck pace? Because the one thing, Winnipeg didn't want to play like that. Winnipeg didn't want to play a track meet. The Avs dragged them into that track meet. Can you do the same with Dallas, and can you do it early? And we'll see. I mean, look, it's not going to take very long for us to figure out which Avs team shows up in game one. I'll just say that. Yeah, we'll see. About a period and a half through, you're going to be able to tell.
Yeah, I guess there is still that part of me that just as much as I thought, hey, this team could easily go to the Western Conference Finals. This team could easily lose in the first round. Okay, the team that I thought had the potential to go to the Western Conference Finals showed up in that first round series. Is that the team now? Are they settled into who and what they are, or is there still some, Jekyll and Hyde to them about them that we don't know yet, right? We won't know until they get off into this series, and do we continue to see them play at a level? But I would think that you could feel pretty good about what you're going to get from them, because if you always knew the potential was there, and then you have this group of guys that have so many players from the team that won a cup just a couple of years ago, I would think that confidence is more likely to carry over into the next round, because you're talking about guys who've done it.
Sure.
And now the guys that are new to this team that have been brought on, now they can look around and say, okay, this is a team that knows how to win. They just played like that in the first round. I can see how confident they are now, the Rantanens, the McKinnons, all that group. That would lead me, as one of those newer guys, a Mittelstadt, for example, to say, okay, I can feel really good about my game, our game, and let's keep this going. There's no reason why we can't keep this going.
Yeah. You brought up earlier that you're confident in what you're going to get from your core guys. And I think from an effort perspective, I would agree with you. Production-wise, I think it's hard to at least forecast that into the playoffs. Like that Lowry line with Appleton and Niederreiter in the Winnipeg series, I thought they did an outstanding job against the Avs top line, much more so than just about anybody this year. Like McKinnon's going to be the MVP. I mean, I think he had 9 points. It felt like somewhat of a quiet 9,
right,
compared to the year that he had, which is credit to them. Like he's that good of a player. He's playing at that high of a level, but still, it felt like his impact wasn't as felt because of what the checking line for Winnipeg did against him, which is why Mittelstadt's line, I think it was 12-6. Colorado's second line outscored Winnipeg's second line. Hey, I mean, that's a +6 from one line. You'll take that all day, every day.
But isn't it funny, though, you talk about the so-called supposed struggle, and I know where you're going at with McKinnon, Rantanen. At times you were like, wow, they're not as they just don't feel as dominant, throughout this series as we're accustomed to seeing them. Yet you look up at the end of the day and you see their production, and then you compare it to a lot of other key players, teams, top lines, other teams, and you realize, hey, wait a minute, a lot of teams would have killed to have that kind of production from their top players. So maybe it says something. What makes the Avalanche really even scarier is they went out and did what they did in the first round without feeling like their top 2 forwards were as dominant as you'd expect them to be. If they've got another gear, and they do, Wow. How scary is that potential?
It makes me reflect on the 22 Cup run and just how damn good that team was. We're talking about these high standards we have for them, but you bring up astutely that if you look around the other series, which have been largely lackluster, in my opinion, in the first round, you may find leading scorers with 5-6 points, right? The Avs have five guys with more than, I think it was 8 points, or maybe it was 5 guys with more than 5. I think it was 5 guys with more than 8 points. We just looked it up. The point I'm making is that we have that standard from the Cup run year because that team was scary good. And now we look at, one series where maybe you feel like, hey, maybe your top line wasn't as dominant. That's kind of, first world problems based upon who they were.
Yes.
And trying to at least get back to that level or somewhere close to that championship level. So I think that is a good point. But the reason why I brought up what I brought up is because as we've seen in the next round, the fact of the matter is if the other 3 lines don't play like they played against Winnipeg, things will change.
Yes.
You've got to have, Colton's line, Trennan's line, and quick shout out to guys individually. Jonathan Drouin goes out. They start Zach Parise with the top line. That clearly does not work. He can't skate with those guys. So Bednar makes the correct call, puts Nichushkin up on the top line. Now you got a big top line, size-wise, skill-wise. And now Parise, you need him to fit in. We brought you in, Zach, because we needed veteran experience, a guy who's going to be a playoff player. Well, guess what? He stepped up, adapted, was the rat, was the greasy guy, good setups, great job in and around the net to put home some goals in that series. And I thought Lehkonen, as we mentioned, Mittelstadt was great. But then the Wood and Colton additions, you saw why they went out and got those guys in the first round. Like, those might not be highly productive regular season players, but as far as character, glue guys, physicality, you need that in the playoffs. Colton's got, and that's the thing is, like, we see the Avs bring in some free agents who maybe haven't won a cup. We talk about the Zach Parise, right? Mittelstadt, Trenin. Well, you bring in Ross Colton. That's a guy who's won a cup with championship experience. So you help meld some of that in, and you can really see their value. And then I go back to the one guy I feel like I'd be remiss if we didn't shout out is Andrew Cogliano. Like, that guy can play here as long as he wants, honestly. He has been probably all-time one of my favorite Avs.
Yeah.
Just a warrior. Just, you'll never hear a peep out of him. Unbelievable leader. And late in Game 5, he's blocking shots, throwing. 17 years in the league now. So you've got some really key ingredients here to the championship recipe. Let's just see if they can continue putting it together. And again, Pete DeBoer has given them problems, Dallas's head coach, in the past. So not only are you going to have to outplay them, you're going to have to out-strategize them too.
Well, that's why I can't wait for the series to get started, because I'm just so curious to see if what they did in round 1 is the Avs.
Right.
Is that the real Avs? Okay. Or was that just, okay, it was hot for one series, and then it's not going to be there for the second series? I think we're going to get our answer pretty quickly early on in this series. So I like the Avs. I like the Avs in 6.
Okay.
You got the Avs in 5, I believe?
Yeah, I'm going to stick with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel good about it. If they go to 7, we'll see. Because you got to go. Dallas, Pete DeBoer is 8-0 all-time in Game 7s. So let's just hope, it doesn't get there. I do expect a better fight than we saw to Winnipeg.
I do too.
I think the Avs kind of popped them in the mouth, and Winnipeg just didn't know how to adjust. Maybe from a physicality perspective, that was consistent, but they just couldn't find their offense. And I think part of that was what Colorado did. Puck possession is your best defense. Tilt the ice. Generate your zone, Euro zone time, generate a cycle. But the other big part of this, I think, Mike, is special teams. This series for the Avalanche, as good as, line 2 was, as good as line 3 and line 4 were at 5-on-5, special teams are key.
Yep.
You've got to convert on the power play.
If you're able to convert, what were they, close to 40%?
Yeah, I think
power
so.
play?
Yeah, they were 4th altogether.
Yeah, that's crazy. Because in the regular season, if you could be between 24 and 28%, you're one of the league leaders.
Right.
If you can be above 30% in the playoffs, oof, That is a huge advantage. Huge advantage. So let's see if they can't keep it going. We'll have 2 games to talk about on Friday when we do our next edition of the Mile High Hockey Podcast. Matt Smith saying in, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
You always have a welcoming seat here whenever you would like. We'll be back again later in the week. Go Avs, Dallas, games 1 and 2 coming up this week. We'll talk about it later in the week here on the Mile High Hockey Podcast, presented by For Comfort Gutters.